global happenings today. We communicate, we analyze global news. Stay tuned.
Hello beautiful people, welcome back to our channel. For a while now, some few hours actually ago, the president had been, saying with all boldness, in literally dragging the president of the United States over the fact that our economy is stable and all. Apparently, there's more that meets the eyes, and you're going to find out what it is, because it looks as if Nigeria and some other countries in Africa are taking a pound of flesh. Well, before we go to the news proper, can you subscribe to our channel? Now, according to the news, the United States Trade Representative, USTR, an agency of the United States government, has slammed Nigeria for imposing an import ban on 25 product categories. Now, the USTR raised concerns that the restrictions were hurting U.S. exporters and undermining trade relations. Now, in a social media post, the USTR listed Nigeria's import policy among the top 10 unfair trade practices by foreign government. Now, the latest move was part of President Donald Trump's scrutiny of trade relations between the country and the world. Now, the USTR argued that such restrictions denied U.S. companies access to a growing consumer base in Africa's largest economy. Now, the post read, and I quote, Nigeria's import ban on 25 different product categories impacts U.S. exporters, particularly in agriculture, pharmaceuticals, beverages, and consumer goods. Now, restrictions on items like beef, pork, poultry, fruit juice, medications or medicaments, spirits limits U.S. market access and reduce export opportunities. Now, these policies create significant trade barriers that lead to lost revenue for U.S. businesses looking to expand in the Nigerian market. Now, the Nigerian-U.S. trade balance. Nigerians' decision to promote local product by banning the import of certain foreign goods has affected its trade relationship with the United States. Data from the U.S. International Trade Commission shows that Nigerian imports from U.S. in February 2025 were $286.3 million US dollars, down from $423.6 million US dollars in February 2024. That's a 32.4% drop. Now, overall, Nigeria's import from the United States dropped from $951.6 million US dollars in 2024 to $643.1 million US dollars in 2025. Now, total trade between the U.S. and Nigeria in the first 2 months of 2025 reached $1.33 billion US dollars in January, and the U.S. had a $143 million US dollars trade deficit with Nigeria, but this changed to $187 million surplus in February. Nigeria's export to the U.S. rose from $214 million US dollars in January to $474 million US dollars in February, a 121.5% increase. However, the overall yearly export value fell by 19.9% to $647 million US dollars. Crude oil remains Nigeria's biggest export to the United States. In the first 2 months of 2025, crude oil made up to 64.31% of U.S. import from Nigeria, valued at $413.6 million US dollars. Oil import dropped from 3.5 million barrels in January to 1.8 million barrels in February, causing a decline in monthly import value. Other countries scrutinized by the U.S. Other countries mentioned by the U.S. agency includes India, Thailand, Kenya, Angola, Algeria, and the European Union. The U.S. government said these countries have created trade barriers that collectively stifle billions of dollars in U.S. export. India was singled out for banning U.S. ethanol import, while Kenya's 50% tariff on American corn and EU's new environmental rules were flagged as measures that disadvantaged American producers. In Africa, Angola also drew Washington's anger for announcing it would restrict import licenses for poultry and meat products starting in July 2025. Algeria's restrictions in generic pharmaceutical products and medical devices create significant barriers for U.S. exporters. And the USTR noted Angola is currently the latest African market for US poultry and warned that the planned restriction could have significant commercial consequences. Part of the statement reads, and I quote, "In 2024, US poultry exports to Angola were valued at $136 million US dollars. Angola is the 9th largest market for US poultry export globally and the largest market for US poultry on the African continent. These new trade restrictions will significantly impact American farmers and ranchers." Wow, this is getting interesting. It all started with Donald Trump in the United States making some of his restrictions. A lot of tariffs was placed on many countries. Of course, France and some European countries reacted immediately, insisting that, well, what is good for the goose is definitely good for the gander. And of course, there seemed to be some in-house discussion. It looked as if Africa was helpless because I was like, my goodness, all of this ban, we can't export, and we need some of this export in foreign investment, for foreign revenue. Apparently, the president also, that's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, also have some tactics in this. It's good to know that he's also probably with the help of his commissioners and ministers and the likes, they kind of brainstormed. Is US the only market? Of course not. There may be a good market, but there are other markets, and don't forget that Nigeria have one of the biggest markets in Africa. We have population. We also have landmass, but particularly population, where that helps whatever product you're bringing to make us one of the biggest consumers. And literally speaking, we produce a lot of things, but due to, so to speak, our inordinate way of organizing things, we seem not to be able to gain a lot. Look at our gold, a lot of our mining aspects. I do not know how these guys are mining it, if the government is involved, but more individuals are into this. Go to Zamfara, we go have the golds and the rest. We have the ones for lead and all that. It's not fully harnessed in commercial quantities simply because we have some corrupt politicians or some corrupt individuals, some corrupt elites in Nigeria who have decided to siphon or sideline some of these things to gain government, into government pockets, and it goes into individual pockets. So sometimes some of these products do exported, but they are not, they don't find their ways into the coffers of the country, even if it would, probably very minimal. But we ought to be exporting a lot. If you export a lot, you're going to make much money because we are blessed both in human resources and natural resources, and even environmental resources, mineral resources as well. But we tend not to use them 100% maximally. But it's good to know that we are not helpless. And when Donald Trump made that policy, I knew that there will have to be some sort of counter reactions. And I think he should also reduce the tax from other countries of the world as well. I'm sure others will also look into that direction. That's going to wrap it up.